Lee's talk is another in a series of his talks that are off the wall. That's actually what the script says. That's not my personal opinion. Thought-provoking and on a topic we don't think about very often, yet is of prime importance to all human beings. Words and how we put them together help to define us as human beings.
Thank you, Deb. We speak, we communicate, but do we really? We are homo sapiens. Unlike any other species, we have sophisticated language. Without it, modern civilization would not be possible. We can communicate with each other in meaningful ways. Our language capacity allows us to plan, to express to each other beauty and meaning and poetry and warnings and emotions and ideas and feelings and so on. Language, when used positively, greatly enhances the human experience. We're no longer Neanderthals. What's not to like about that? On the other hand, language is our worst enemy. It gets us into lots of trouble. Most of this you already know. I'm just reminding you as to how much trouble language gives us. There is no universal language, unfortunately. That in itself is a huge problem. People in different nations and different cultures cannot talk with each other. Even dialects within the same culture, they can't talk to each other. If they use an interpreter, there is often a misunderstanding that results. Sometimes, as in Switzerland or Canada, there's more than one official language. It's also a problem when adults in migration and refugees have to learn a new language as an adult. On top of all this, there's the issue of language dialects. Often I can hardly understand an Irish person or a Cockney speaking accent or a Bostonian's. From an emotional perspective, being understood when one speaks is of the utmost importance. We get frustrated or even upset if we're not understood. The converse is also true, that if we can't understand the other person, it's frustrating and often defeats the communication. These things by themselves would support the idea that language is a huge problem. The rest of this talk will simply add to our awareness of the scope of the problem. One of the most dangerous usages of language is that of the lie. To lie is to deceive, and that defeats real communication. As we know, there are two kinds of lies, those of commission and those of omission. Neither of those are good, obviously, and a lie of omission is often harder to see than a lie of commission. Lying defeats integrity and trust. Our former president is a classic example, and I'm told that he doesn't even know he's lying. In a court of law, one must tell the truth, under oath to do so. A good attorney can often sniff out the truth and reveal the lie of commission. It is much harder in court to bring out a lie of omission. Close to the lie is deception. The intent to deceive is akin to telling a lie, but not quite. It may be factually accurate as to some things, but not to others. In World War II, the Allies deceived the Nazis as to where the invasion of Europe would occur. We think of that as a necessary deception. Also short of the lie is the matter of misrepresentation. It contains enough of the truth to deceive the listener, but it doesn't tell the whole truth. It's not a lie, it's a half-lie. usually believed by the gullible and those who do not think critically. Our former president is a master of this one also. Yet another problem is that of the use of hyperbole. This distorts the truth as to scale. It often results in a misunderstanding. When the truth is stretched too much by language, it's no longer the truth. Then we come to folk sayings. I have made a collection of over 450 American folk sayings and what they mean. People who do not speak much English may know the literal meaning of the words, but not know what the person is really communicating. For example, don't rock the boat. What is being communicated is do not upset things. However, it can mislead a person listening to think about boats. Another problem with language is a verbal trick. This is where you say one thing but really mean the opposite. For example, oh yeah, I really want to do that. Or confused use of pronouns can mislead a listener. For example, it's not me who did it, it really wasn't me. Next, we come to one of my favorites, misleading language. We tell kids about Santa Claus. Then when they're a bit older, we tell them there is no Santa Claus. That is just a myth. That can cause serious distrust of language and parents. Of course, teaching kids religious myth rises to the top of the list. They are contrary to science, to common sense, to truth, and to critical thinking. The language they use is accurate, but the content is not. For example, in the book of Genesis, it says, the snake talked. This is an abuse of language. It often gets more subtle. One person says something controversial, and a listener agrees because it agrees with what he or she already thinks. Confirmation bias on speed. By law, the police can lie in an interrogation, usually to obtain a confession. That is problematic language at its best, since it can result in a distrust of the police. What makes all of the above examples of how language can be our nemesis pale is when we come to the issue of translation from one language to another. Often nuances of meaning and intention get lost. Also, it's often the case that the words spoken do not convey the emotion attached to them, or the lack of emotion either. For example, I missed you. With emotion, it can mean one thing, and without emotion, it may mean something very different. Sometimes in written language, things are misspelled and the meaning is altered. For example, the word blue, if it is spelled B-L-E-W instead of B-L-U-E, the meaning is very different. Another problem is with the game of telephone, which we've all played. We have all experienced where what started out to communicate the thing ends up something very different being communicated. The problem with language also occurs when we are actually speaking on the phone. Further complicating our use of language is the fact that there are many kinds of specialty language. There's academic language, scientific language, street language, legal language, obscene language, ethnic language, baby talk, dog training language, artificial intelligence language, social media language, texting language, to name a few. These all carry different meanings at different times and places. The different kinds of specialty language can be a problem for the listener or reader. In one context, something may use language that has no meaning if and when used in another specialty setting. For example, the letters LOL on Facebook do not mean to hang around by the pool. Add to all of the above the idea that there are different language usages depending on the purpose for which it is spoken or written. For example, some language is to persuade, some is to comfort, some is to intimidate, some is to support. The same phrases may be in two or more of those purposes, but because of the purpose, the meaning may be very different. It is often the case that the rhythm of the language, whether spoken or written, can affect the meaning. Spoken slowly, the same words may convey a different meaning than if they are spoken rapidly. Another factor in all of this, which is often mentioned, is the style of the language. Great authors are often praised for their style. The overall effect of language is often different depending on the style of the speaker or writer. It's also the case that the sound of a word or group of words can impact on how it is received. The words, "get out of here," if yelled in anger, is very different than if they are said in jest. In addition, grammar can seriously distort meaning. For example, "It ain't hisself that's the problem, I is." These days, we hear or read a lot of bigoted language. Racial slurs, ethnic slurs, religious slurs are nothing new. They are, however, uses of language that tend to destroy the social contract. They take us from all of us to us and them. So then, how about the phenomenon of a person who's a motor mouth? He or she can't shut up. They love to hear the sound of their own voice, have lots of opinions, and usually talk about himself or herself. Now we arrive at language that is cruel by intent. The words are meant to cause emotional harm, like online bullying. There's a spectrum of how there's a spectrum of how harmful a bigoted remark is to those to whom it is directed. There are two kinds of bigoted remarks. First is that which is told directly to the listener. Some listeners will be more hurt by the remark than will others. The other kind is indirect. It's systemic, but just as harmful. The hurt from bigotry is emotional. The old adage, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." Most of the time, for most people, that's simply not so. Often words, language, is more hurtful than physical harm. The physical harm heals rather quickly, whereas the emotional hurt may be traumatic and last for years. How a word or phrase is pronounced can affect how it is understood. The same word spoken in different regional dialects will convey a different meaning. For example, "He's an old fogey," or "He's an old bogey." Is it true that language can cause trauma? My daughters, both of whom are biracial, were homeschooled until grade 5, and then they went to public school. There, they each were subjected to rather vicious, bigoted, harmful language, over and over. Was it traumatizing? I cannot think it was not. Language that is purposely false and misleading can cause another type of harm. It could occasion the listener or reader to make a poor investment or miss an important appointment or cause a rift in a relationship, and so on. We generally give a degree of trust to people until they use language to mislead us on purpose. It's hard enough to prevent oneself from being illogical. It is often even harder to see it when the speaker or writer is illogical. This can lead the listener or reader to believe something that should not be believed. Another big factor in language doesn't always serve us is this. We live in a global world, which is one world, one humanity, one nature. Yet there are many hundreds of different languages. We can't communicate directly with each other, yet we have to. About 100 years ago, a universal auxiliary language was created called Esperanto. Some of you remember that, right? It was supposed to be universally learned and enable people to talk to each other. It went nowhere. Why not? Was it too new? Was it too difficult? Did it run contrary to a real or perceived emotional need? Did it contradict tribalism? Who knows? On top of all of that, language is fluid. It's always changing. Meanings change. Phrases change. Idioms change, and so on. What was said in the past may have a very different meaning from what it means today. I want to go back to religious language. The three most common words in nearly all the religions are these: faith, soul, God. If you take a 15-year-old kid who has never been linguistically abused by religious language and never indoctrinated with religion, who in fact knows absolutely nothing about it, you, being religious, say to him or her, you need to take care of your soul. He or she, the kid, then asks, where is that? What is this soul made of? What color is it? When did I obtain it? What does it do? You answer, I don't know. Then tell the kid he or she must have faith. The kid asks, faith in what? Is faith verifiable, he says. Is it self-delusion? No, you say. Faith can move mountains. The kid asks, well, where does it move them to? You respond, I don't know. You then say to the kid, you need to have faith in God. The kid asks, what is God? Where is God? What does this God look like? Why does this God permit evil and suffering in the world? Again, you answer, I don't know. It seems to me, the kid replies, that a person can't really believe in that which he or she knows nothing about, that which he or she knows only from hearsay from other people. They don't really believe in that which they know nothing about, the kid says. They just believe in believing. Given all the above, there are no simple answers to the problems that language presents us with. There may not be any answers at all. The preponderance of reasons why language is our nemesis is overwhelming. Perhaps we should all stop talking. Thank you.